right, to the working class. And same with Joe Biden, actually. Like this like class sort of politics, it's just not working, right? It's
I mean, I don't really
very
know if Biden did like ran along the policy line of things.
I think with the virus or with the Build Back Better thing,
I'd say it was very kind of like a cultural. It was like a cultural signaling to people who are in these suburbs, in these areas, being like, "We're gonna bring America back to the way it was, like back when you thought it was like respectable." Like just everything the way it was before Obama. Nothing's gonna fundamentally change for the people at the top, is what he says, and that is really just the kind of like the calm restoration of normalcy was, I think, really what Biden was about, definitely more than any policy position.
it's a big problem for the Democrats, yeah, because now that they're courting so many of these college educated, relatively more wealthier voters, right? How are they going to balance that message with trying to win over the Trump voters, right, who are more economically disaffected? I think it's a big issue for the Democrats now because I'm not sure if they can maintain that coalition, right? Because they may need to maintain a certain sort of national narrative, but it's difficult, I think.
I don't even think they're going to try. I think really what the biggest realignment is going to be a very, very kind of coastal, and it doesn't set up the Democrats well because they're the biggest kind of college educated cultural like hotspots are in not very like smart electoral areas. So you're going to have like these huge kind of bases
Yeah,
of like culturally liberal people who are really, that's all the Democratic Party stands for anymore. And these kind of like it's kind of don't be, it's kind of like be respectable. It's kind of like don't be kind of an ass, like don't be mean, or
yeah.
don't be kind of weak. Like those are the two cultural dividing lines I think that we see at play here, and those are it's really, as you say, completely devoid from policy. And the Democrats, I think through Joe Biden, and I think very unsuccessfully, probably going to get killed in 2022, are going for that kind of second line there.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting, right? Because even if you remove the sort of the political, well, you can't fully remove it. But if you look to other countries, right? I don't know how well you follow British politics,
Oh, I do.
right? But it's if you look at the Tories, right, the Conservatives in the UK, right, like on things like social welfare, they've actually shifted pretty left, like pretty far to the
Yeah,
left
Boris Johnson
relative
pretty
to that.
much announced a Green New Deal style climate plan like
Like
last
it's
week.
it's it's very strong. It's like very strongly socially conservative, right? Especially with law and order and all of that, and being tough on
Migrant
crime.
politics is a big part of it too. Like
Yeah,
drawing a lot of like fear over this kind of, and that's a big part of what won them. Like to veer off into British politics, like that's what won them Brexit. Like they still had the pro
yeah.
NHS message, but there was still like fear mongering about all these like migrants coming in. They're coming like take the welfare. They're staying in these cheap, like they're these super nice hotels and all that stuff. Like those are the same kind of cultural buttons
And
they're pushing.
yeah, and those buttons, I think they're working pretty well. If you look at the last election cycle, right, where you saw the conservatives really sweep their largest majority since I think the '80s, right? They like killed labor in all of these working class areas, which had been traditionally labor for a very long time too.
A
And it
lot of
was
that
really
was
just this,
Brexit. Yeah.
yeah, it was that Brexit message, right? And if you think about Brexit itself, it's very much like it's such a populist message, right? It saw that it was people in London versus people everywhere else,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's like
And a
and
lot of the labor member, like the labor member base, like the people who pay money to be in the party, and the kind of very very much the kind of people that I would say be directly comparable to like Hillary Clinton supporters, the kind of culturally liberal, economically, just they have no real economic politics, but they're much more, actually they have very right wing economic politics that they don't really talk
well, I
about.
don't know if that. Go on. Sorry for
Yeah, kind of like
interrupting.
the neoliberals. Let's just say, like those neoliberal people, they're very much against Brexit. And funnily enough, I mean, my personal belief on it was all to stop Jeremy Corbyn at the time. But it's definitely like because we have very very funny like the guy who was in charge of Brexit under Jeremy Corbyn in the Labour Party is now the leader of the Labour Party and is saying the direct 180-degree position, which is which is a now pro getting out of the EU position, where he forced Corbyn to really, really change his position on Brexit. So that was it's a whole backstory there, but definitely the same kind of cultural issues that you're touching on.
Yeah, it's very interesting to think about. And then the United States, I think we're seeing that shift. Marco Rubio got kind of killed for saying this on Twitter, but I think like the GOP plan is to sort of build a multiracial working class party, right? Especially now that the GOP is sort of so firmly against big tech, right? In the existing a lot of the existing and prevailing institutions here. I think the message that they're trying to strike will be pretty effective generally.
I do think it'll be largely kind of cultural, like railing at these people, but in a completely non-threatening way. Because what we see a lot of with the big tech stuff on the right is it's like censorship. Yeah. It's not even that they have so much power, which they have incredible amounts of power, but like I don't see people like Josh Hawley or Marco Rubio, who have been super pro-corporate their entire lives, now threatening the interests of people like Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos.
Well, I think I don't know if I would agree with that or not. I know the Democrats have pretty much they pretty much don't care about all of this censorship stuff, right? Because they don't really censor leftists in any capacity. But I think the Republicans still do care about sort of the market or perceived market dominance of some of these companies. I also think, to be honest, I think that Joe Biden is sort of he like at least the wing of the party that he represents, right, and the people he's been surrounding himself with, I don't think he has any intentions to really be that hawkish on big tech. Whereas if you look at Trump, right, you saw that he ordered his DOJ to pursue legal remedies against big tech for censorship, right? I don't think Joe Biden will pursue big tech for either censorship or their market position. Did you see that? I think Eric Schmidt, former CEO and chairman of Google, right, is joining sort of the Biden, or he's serving in some capacity in the Biden administration.
Yeah, it's really just the cabinet that they put in there is just such a complete mess. I do want to get to that in a minute, but we can also we can talk a little bit about the coronavirus here, which is really kind of fascinating. Where we see warning of a surge on top of a surge. U.S. officials are cautioning health for Thanksgiving travelers. And meanwhile, we have Bill de Blasio reopening now New York City's pre-K and elementary schools December 7th. So completely just really what I think is the most fascinating thing here is just the complete lack of leadership. And I honestly think you could point to, it's just a chain, it's almost really a domino chain of in some of these states where we see people like de Blasio and Cuomo and Gavin Newsom in California, and all these people that are just absolutely embarrassing themselves, and it all really, I think, starts at the top.
Well, how far? Like central government leadership?
Yeah, I'm referring with Trump and McConnell mostly.
Trump.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. At this point, the cat is really out of the bag, right? I don't know, like all of these individual governors, these individual mayors, right? They can close everything down, right? But it's going to have to, I think, remain closed down until we get a vaccine. Fortunately, we're getting pretty close to it, it seems. But the leadership has been terrible, right? There's just no coordination. The coordination needs to come from the central government, right? Like New York is doing its best, right, to coordinate with like New Jersey and like Connecticut, right? Like the border states, all of that. But, like when you see it spreading so quickly in the South, right, and in the Midwest, right, and there's so much travel over Thanksgiving, right? That's sort of more of an individual problem for Americans. It's such a catastrophe. Like I feel bad for de Blasio, honestly. He's in such a tough spot because like the consequences of closing down school, they sort of only compound the longer schools close down, right? Especially if you're relying on school for meals or something like that, right? Or if like you're going through the college admissions process, right, and the school's closed down, right, and you're living in the inner city, like that is really tough. Like it is a tough spot to be in, like balancing public health and sort of the consequences to education.
Yeah, it really is did I interrupt you there?
No, you didn't.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, because it is really a tough, as you said, it's a really, really tough balancing act, because you really want to keep these schools open, because especially the younger you go, it has such a negative social effect on these kids to be out of school or be at home and not really getting the material, not getting the socialization. And you can, the schools also have proven, the studies show, they're the least amount of transmission of it's very unlikely that this kind of coronavirus is going on there. It's not nearly as prevalent. The transmission is not nearly as prevalent as, for example, in places like bars and restaurants, which are still open, and you want to be able to keep them open if you're Andrew Cuomo, and also kind of close the schools because of the tax revenue that it creates to provide money to the state that has received no federal aid because of people like Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell. So that's kind of this really just almost like a chain effect, as I mentioned before, of just really kind of scary leadership. What do you think the future holds for a stimulus? Just whether it be in the lame duck session here or with Joe Biden?
I have no idea what Mitch McConnell. It's sort of the ball is in Mitch McConnell's court, to be honest, right? Biden can come up with whatever idea he wants to come up with, right? And progressives will pressure him, moderates will pressure him, but I sort of don't think the odds are in the Democrats' favor that they retake the Senate, right? And if they don't retake the Senate, right, I don't know how much of an incentive there is for Mitch McConnell to come to the bargaining table, and I think even if the Democrats do win those Senate seats, right? Yeah, if the Democrats do win those Senate seats, right, have a 1-vote majority with Harris, right, they can't have any defections, right? Because I don't think they're going to win any Republicans. If you remember when Obama came to office in 2008, I think this is Mitch McConnell's famous quote, right? It's oh, we'll do everything we can to make this a one-term president, right? And then the obstruction followed afterwards, right? And he's good at politics, right? He's good at winning elections. He's good at blocking stuff, but for the nation, it's looking kind of bad. And honestly, I sort of I think I'm sort of skeptical of any more stimulus, to be honest, myself personally. But for the Democrats, it's clear to see, right? They are in a very tough spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
Senate races. Even the House, it's a tight margin too. So
yeah, it's pretty crazy. I think that you need a stimulus. It's not, you absolutely need it to keep people at least through the winter. I'd say in most part through the winter. It's because if you look at after Christmas, that's when some of this the unemployment and especially things with evictions and mortgages start to end, and just at least at the very least reinstating those protections. What is it? 1 in 3 Americans have food insecurity at this point, or 1 in 4. I'm not sure. It's a very precarious situation, and the very few protections that are in place are on the verge of expiring, and there is definitely going to be there's some things that Biden can do as president through executive power, but I don't think it's an open question as to will he want to do them. And their second open question is, what can he accomplish through the Senate with people like Mitch McConnell? Their biggest incentive is to say, both of them, kind of leverage the Georgia Senate races into a better stimulus package, where you could say, if you're a Democrat, to say, this is what we can give you if you vote for us, and the Republicans can kind of say the same.
Yeah, I think that's the latter point you made is really good. I think if Biden wants to or not, I think he does, right? To be honest, no president doesn't want stimulus, right? Especially the debt, that's a future problem. But what I will say is, personally, I think, if you look at the amount of stimulus already injected into the economy, right, by the Federal Reserve, right, and and with the first initial round of stimulus, right, and then all of the renewed funds, and then if you look at the state level, the stimulus there, right, it far exceeds the stimulus in the Great Recession, right, and it far exceeds any other stimulus, right. It's huge levels of government spending, and if you look at our debt, right, I hate to be the guy who points it out because it's not fun, right. It's easy to spend, right. It's easy to use your credit card. But if you look at our expenses, right, and if you look at our income, right, we're just spending at a level that already wasn't sustainable and is even less sustainable now. And I'm not sure we can really spend